Hello, sisters and brothers. Marxism is a guide to action. It is not a dogma nor a philosophy in the traditional sense either. It describes how the working class must unite as a class, struggle for political power, and achieve political supremacy over their oppressors. It leads to the reorganization of society on a collective basis rather than to simply help the capitalists. Many liberal and radical critics of capitalism point out the oppression suffered by the working class. All sorts of articles, essays, and books are written about this. It is something that not only socialists, but all different types of people can observe. People can easily observe that in Los Angeles, thousands of workers toil in sweatshops. They toil in sweatshops, they produce clothes, toys, party favors, and get paid extremely low wages without benefits, most of the workers. We can see the hospital workers who don't even make $10 per hour. Without the workers, that is, the hospital workers, these hospitals would not run. People can see that every office in the city is maintained and sustained by janitors who have to struggle to make $8 per hour. That's only $320 per week, around $270 after taxes. Anyone can see that this is oppressive. But merely noticing the oppression of the working class is not Marxism. Marxism is designed to help every sector of the working class understand its own position in capitalist society. And what the workers understand is important, because the working class, until it becomes conscious and rises together as a class, will remain an oppressed sector of society. The capitalists are extremely aware of the power of the working class. That's why they go out of their way to miseducate and pacify workers. The capitalists use the media, for example, to glorify the war with stories of US soldiers coming home and how proud their families are, all the while innocent women, men, and children are dying each day in the name of US imperialism. Capitalists also perpetuate the myth that workers who own their own homes or can afford to send their kids to school are part of the so-called middle class and not workers. In capitalist society, workers are taught to think of themselves not as a part of a class, but as part of a particular trade or occupation. If you ask other workers, how do you survive or how do you live? Most would say, I'm a secretary, or I'm a meat cutter, or I'm a grocery clerk, or I'm a carpenter. But very few people will say, I'm a worker, or I'm a proletarian. People tend to think by nation, by ethnicity, by trade, but not by class position as a worker in class society. So, what is the working class in the United States? There are 130 million people in this country who get up every day, who go and sell their ability to labor in exchange for wages and a salary. They are more or less in a state of constant insecurity because if the capitalists do not employ them, they won't be able to eat, they won't be able to support their families, and they won't be able to pay the rent or survive. They have nothing except their ability to work. Marx described this as a system of wage slavery. Workers are not owned outright by a particular capitalist, but they are enslaved by the capitalist class that owns all of the property. If the capitalists do not employ you for your wages, you are left to fend for yourself. This is what unites the working class. It is a sector of society that doesn't own the property, which is us, but workers create all the wealth of society. They are employed by capitalists and do all the work for the capitalists. The tiny capitalist class doesn't need to work because they have accumulated the property and wealth flowing from the products and services made by those of us who do work for the wages. As long as each worker is reduced to an individual, enslaved by the system of capitalist wage slavery, then that individual has no power. Each worker is at the mercy of their bosses, and as we can see by condition of so many individual workers in Los Angeles here alone, they are subjected to poverty, racism, sexism, and so many other abuses. However, Marxism teaches that if the working class becomes conscious of its position in society, then the working class can impose its will over the capitalists. The working class is the most important class in this society. You can see this if you examine any particular sphere of life. If the working class, which fundamentally opposes the war in Afghanistan, decided that they would not perform work until all troops were pulled out of Afghanistan, then the capitalist economy would grind to an immediate halt. If it is unleashed, the power of the working class to withhold its labor and act together shows its true position in society. Liberals and radicals see the working class as victims. But we Marxists know that the working class is the only class capable of emancipating society from capitalist exploitation. There are big misunderstandings about what prevents the working class from taking over from the capitalists. Some people think that the main problem is that capitalists, through their control of the capitalist state, have the control of the instruments of repression, the military, the police, and so on. They say that there would be no possible way to dislodge these people from the power, meaning the capitalists, the bosses. But that is not the real problem. The real problem is the lack of class consciousness inside the working class. Once the working class begins to move and becomes conscious, it will instantly recognize its own potential as the main power in society. Without dock workers loading ships, without metro rail workers working the lines, without electrical and communication workers facilitating the use of telephones and all other forms of communication, no military force could ever be a genuine threat to the people. Those who believe that a socialist revolution is impossible in the United States also claim that the working class is too politically backward for it to happen. We say no. They say that the workers will never think of themselves as part of the working class and that they will always be divided by patriotism, racism, and political conservatism. We reject completely the idea that this working class in the United States, multinational, educated, the most productive working class in history, is somehow incapable of grasping what left intellectuals understand. Dismissing the working class as too backward, conservative, or apathetic conforms to how the bourgeoisie views in the working class. In fact, that is exactly what the ruling class wants progressive people to believe, that we are too backward to do anything or to make any changes as a working class. Every time the people rise up, the ruling class is shocked. They never expected South African workers to defeat apartheid. They never thought that the Russian workers, the Chinese, the Cubans, and others they thought that they were too backwards to rise up and defeat them. But they were wrong. They were terribly wrong. The working class ultimately enters into the process of struggle, not because of its advanced political consciousness. The workers during the struggle that join the struggle are compelled to fight, not because they've read all the right books. People fight because they must fight. They have no choice to fight. They have no option. They must fight to live, to feed their families, pay the rent, and to overcome the devastating impact of unemployment. The working class is always compelled to struggle to survive. That's in our nature. We in the Party for Socialism and Liberation know that the working class can achieve class consciousness by the intervention of revolutionary socialists in the class struggle. That is a task of our party. To join with every struggle, no matter how big or small, a revolutionary Marxist party must bring the message of class consciousness and struggle so that as the workers themselves fight, they achieve a genuine understanding of their potential to bring down the capitalist oppressing class. If the workers fail to achieve class consciousness, it is an indication of the failure of the left, the failure of the vanguard. And if we want to talk about what is wrong with society, it is better for each of us to strengthen the revolutionary vanguard forces rather than blame the workers of their supposed deficiencies. There are endless assessments, analysis, and surveys of all of which say the same thing. Poverty is growing, wages are dropping, workers are losing their pensions. The U.S. capitalist class is shifting its economic woes on the backs of working class. So while the rich are getting richer, the misery of the working class is increasing dramatically. You can elect a new president and every capitalist politician, and this will not change at all. The only real way to change our destiny is to overthrow all the capitalists from their position of power so that the working class can reorganize society for the benefit of the people. Do y'all agree? Yeah. History shows that in times of great social change, the illusions of today are cast aside as the working class moves forward to fulfill its historic role as the agent for revolutionary change. Socialists work to hasten this process, of course. We live in a society that allows homeless peoples harbors unemployment and poverty on a mass scale. Some workers who are lucky enough to find a job can barely survive to put food on the table and provide for their families. I worked myself for a multi-million-dollar company that did just that.